Hi, everyone. It is Tamika with Black Girls Who Write. We are a community organization built to help Black women authors grow their business and their brand as an author. We are about community, we are about uplifting, and we are about avocation. And today I would love to present Imani Thompson. She is the author of the newly released Honey, by Penguin Random House. So I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself, and then we're going to get started with some questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all. Yep, zooming in from London. So I have always wanted to be a writer, and I grew up in the southwest of the UK, which is down in the countryside. I was always like scribbling away stories when I was little. And then when I was at university studying sociology in my final year, I thought, okay, I need to come up with the idea for my first novel. So this is where I got the idea for Honey, which I started writing as soon as I graduated. I was working a number of jobs whilst writing, but also including being a bookseller, which I really loved. And I sold Honey back in 2024 now. So it's so exciting that it's been published just last week.
Oh, I'm so proud. It sounds like it's been an amazing journey. I love hearing when authors are like, oh, I've worked on this for many, many moons ago, and now it's here, because it's just such a relaxation point. Like, I'm done. I can release it to the world. And that's such an important thing, because when you are honing a craft and you're releasing it to the world, it's like it's yours, but it's no longer yours when you when you give it to the public. And
Yes.
it was amazing to partner with you and Penguin Random House on, getting Honey, not just copies, but also like creating like a fun activation in DC, where we worked with Grounded, a wellness cafe, and they had honey latte. So we were giving out honey lattes for about a week and a half. We just ended it yesterday, and then copies of your book for within our little free library. So that was amazing. We had a amazing turnout. Like, I think we sold out of all the lattes, all of the books are gone. I made sure I had my book before, everyone else took theirs. So let's jump right in to some questions. I have some really, really good questions for you, because I also saw that you studied sociology at Cambridge, and I think sociology is such, between that and anthropology and psychology, are so important in today's society, especially now with everything going on in the world and just so many changes from like technology and print and politics, like everything. So Cambridge sociology gave you the theories, but how did studying people change how you write characters?
Yeah, it's such a good question because when I started off at university, actually, I was doing English literature because of always wanting to be a writer. I was like, well, surely English makes the most sense as a subject. And then 4 weeks into medieval literature, I was like, oh, actually, this is making less sense. And I went to a sociology lecture with a friend and I was like, oh my God, this is how my mind works. I love how sociology deconstructs society and asks why we do the things we do, where our power structures come from, and how they've shifted over time. And I do actually think that as a writer, whilst of course English is so helpful in terms of breaking down text and seeing how texts work, as a writer, you're often really breaking down characters and character motivations. So much of my studies in sociology have fed how I build characters and the relationships between them, and being able to think about those cultural dynamics in a really deep way, which I think infuses my writing with just something else. And I love it so much to think about, yeah, all of the whys all the time. So
Oh, I love that. And sociology teaches you to interrogate who holds power and who doesn't. So, how consciously were you mapping that onto every man Yursa decides to kill? And please forgive me if I'm pronouncing her name incorrectly. You can let me know that I pronounced it
No,
correctly?
I say yes, sir, as well.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of the men, it was because I wanted her to kill men in ways that women are often killed. I was really interested in flipping the lens on violence. So then it was a decision of, okay, who is she going to kill? Like, who will these men be? And it was interesting because when I started writing and when I gave it to my agent, she was like, we need to make sure the men aren't too stereotypical because you can fall into these like stereotypical depictions of misogyny. So I wanted to really play into those power dynamics in a very truthful way, whilst also making them empathetic and their own characters as well. But definitely, again, the social theory really helped in assessing those power dynamics and in deciding who she was going to kill or not kill.
Okay. I love that. And I like when people studied things differently and through a different lens to make sure like, okay, we don't want to do this stereotypically. Like, how can I flip the switch? So I think that was really cool that you did in the book. I'm not going to give too many details away because I want people to be able to ingest what they read themselves. Your degree required you to sit with some of the most uncomfortable literature, I'm sure, on racial violence. How did you protect yourself emotionally while also letting that material fuel while you were writing this novel? Because it's 400 pages, and that 400 pages is deep.
It is deep. It is. It's very true. I know it's something I really struggled with at university, actually, because I feel within academia, it's the idea of objectivity, and you have to be very non-emotional. And I always think, but as you say, some of the stuff that you're reading and the history that you're grappling with, like how can you have a non-emotional response to that? So I really appreciated writers such as Audre Lorde who do go into the emotions but in an analytical way. I think it's important to acknowledge if you're having an emotional response, and it kind of goes to how these institutions are built, right? Because historically they have been very built for white men, and they probably don't have as much as an emotional response when they're reading these things historically. So it is easy, this idea of objectivity, but I definitely really question the idea of objectivity at university. And in terms of protecting myself, it's funny because for me, the more I study something and the better I understand it, weirdly, the more calm I become about it, even though it should be the opposite. It's like when I'm reading about the climate crisis, like the more I understand about why we are as we are, I think it's a full sense of control that I have in reading. So I, in a way, I find it better to go deeper into the literature because it gives me an understanding that I can. It's really hard to explain why this is, but yeah, this I just try to go as deep as I can into something, and there's like a weird protection that comes in that.
I think that's so interesting because I too am a writer. I write indie. And years ago, I wrote like a paranormal-esque gothic romance. I guess you would call it that. And I don't know how I came up with the ideas that I did, but after I was done writing that book, I was like, I need a break. I need some joy. I need some sun. I need a vacation because it got really, really dark. So just listening to you and you're like, yeah, I actually got calmer as I wrote about men being murdered. It's like, what?
I think the other thing is that I write through things to try and understand them. So the writing process is my way of processing what I'm thinking about and exploring. So, and I've done that ever since I was little. I always like to there's something in the creativity of it as well, as opposed to writing an academic essay, that I think there's something cathartic about it.
Yes, I'm sure because for me, while I need a break with writing stuff that goes that dark, that deep, but if I'm like watching something, like I love a good thriller or
Oh,
murder
interesting.
mystery. I love the Saw films, like seeing stuff like that. Like right now I'm watching The Boys, so I'm like, this is actually enjoyable. And it's like, am I crazy?
Oh. Because I can't do watching. Like if I'm going off to sleep and I watch something really dark, I'll have nightmares. So I always have to watch joyful things, but I can write darker things.
It's so funny because we're the exact opposites. Like
Yes, we are.
I could watch the darker things. Like I'll go to bed watching something about vampires and I am sleeping like a baby. But it's like,
No.
no. My next question is, So you studied at Cambridge, and so does Yarsa. How much did being a Black woman inside that institution inform what you gave her to feel, the spaces and times of alienation, the entitlement was shown in the first couple of pages, and I was like, who are you talking to? And also her boredom, because I know Cambridge is kind of like a little bit on the outskirts of London. So, you know, how did any of your personal experiences at Cambridge lead you into kind of how you wrote your main character?
Yeah, I mean, of course, having studied there, I just thought it was an institution that was so ripe for satire and a really good institution to backdrop this story because of everything it symbolizes in terms of hierarchies of the past, being quite an exclusionary space as well historically. But I was really keen because there is a lot of literature and films that are done in Oxbridge to show it from the Black perspective, but also to show a student really thriving there, because whilst all of the microaggressions that she experiences and that exclusionary nature of the university is still true, at the same time, there's a lot of really radical work being done there. And I met amazing women whilst I was there. So I wanted her to be thriving in a way that makes her bored, because even though she's sort of like reaching the pinnacle, like she, you know, tops her year group and she's doing this fully funded PhD and she's in one of the hardest colleges to get into, she can do all of that quite easily. And I thought that was interesting to look at it from this perspective of arrogance that she has, like she sort of embodies and she enjoys the arrogance of the university. So I thought that was a fun dynamic, and instead of showing her struggling there, to be like, this girl is like flying high in this place. And equally, because yeah, it is a very small town, it's like a pretty small town, but actually my brother, when he came to see me at the university, he was like, this place is so boring. I mean, like there's nothing to do here. So I thought that's a great setup for a murderous character too.
It's been like so wonky, and it just kind of like went in and out. Can you repeat the last sentence, or if you remember the last sentence you said?
Yeah, so I was saying, I was just making my brother, when he came to view me at the university, he spent a weekend with me and he was like, this is the most boring place ever. Like, how could you come to university here? There's nothing to do. And I was like, oh, like it is a good setup for murder. I think it's very interesting this as well, that we feel, oh, she's very driven by rage and revenge, but in a huge way, she's just driven by being quite bored. I enjoyed writing this dynamic.
It's so funny how, as Black women, when we're bored or when we, you know, don't want to do something anymore, it's just like, let me find something else to do. Some of us pick up new hobbies, some of us pick up new degrees, and it's just like, we are the only group that is like, let me find something else to do, and it's never rest. It's always like, I'm bored.
Let me like stop poisoning men.
Right. Let me stop poisoning men. Let me go to Cambridge and teach. And I love how within the entire novel, I kind of want to know what her zodiac sign is, because she's so like unimpressed by everything.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Her friend is literally having a crisis, and she's just like, well.
And this is what was really fun to write her too, like in that scene where she's experiencing the professor, where the professor's, you know, saying they're being angry, and her friend, right, she has an emotional response and a normal emotional response to this, and Yessa just finds it like so amusing. She's like pleased that there's some drama in the meeting. Yes. And I feel that's so telling to her character, that she culturally understands where she lies. Of course she does, she studies sociology, she gets it, but she's so emotionally unbothered by it. And she kind of enjoys the play of manipulation that she can have. And yeah, it's just really fun to write someone who was like so disengaged with society in that way.
Yarsa is giving me Aquarius energy, because I'm
yeah, it's true. I never thought of her star side. It's a good question.
A lot of people say that we're very aloof and just unimpressed. And it's just like, well, yes. Because we're also kind of like deemed as like the God sign or the smartest sign, you know. Why would
that sounds very
like, she's just, that's my type of girl, just very like, oh, well, yeah. I do too. And what else you got? I love that. If a sociology professor assigned your novel Honey to their class, what would you want the main discussion question to be?
Oh, that's fun. I think I would like the discussion to look at depictions of female rage and how the novel moves beyond female rage. Because it's in its setup, it is the idea of, oh, we are looking at a very angry woman who is, seeking retribution in this way. But quite quickly, when I started writing, I realized that she really wasn't driven by rage at all. So then it was a question of, well, what is motivating her beyond that? If she's only giving lip service to all this racial theory. So I think that's a really interesting space to hold a discussion, is though, why do we kill and why do we seek power if it's actually, there's no justification to it by the end.
And I think she does a phenomenal job of doing these things and still like keeping her persona like no one would know.
We lived
And
it.
there's no evidence. It's just like she's thinking on so many different planes because she's technically the smartest person in the book. So let's dive deep in here about more of Yrsa and her accidentally killing someone. And instead of spiraling with guilt, she feels alive. And what was it about that specific emotional logic that made her the right character to tell this story in this space? Because you throw so many new characters at us like so quickly. Like by the time I'm on like chapter 3, chapter 4, I'm like, wait, this is a whole nother person in here. And now I'm starting to feel like a detective, like who is going to be targeted next?
It's true. There is like a real constellation of men that appear in this novel, and it's like, who will she kill? Yeah, she came to me so immediately. Like, I got the idea one afternoon, I started writing that same afternoon, and her voice was just so present and so immediate. And to me, what I love about her and her killing, or why I feel she is the character who goes on this journey, is it's that taste of like real excitement and power that it gives her. And when she sort of accidentally murders this professor at the beginning, and she just gets this rush, she gets this kick like she hasn't had for so many years. And there are points in her childhood where she's had it. There are other things she's done with men in the past that have given it to her, but ultimately she's an addict always chasing a high. And she had lost that high for a long time until this thing happens with the professor. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting dynamic to play with. Like, she has this absolute hunger inside of her that just sort of can't really be satiated. And this is what like propels the pacing of the novel forward as well.
And I'm supposed to jump into this question later, but I want to bring it up now because you were talking about how Yrsa was growing up, and one thing that stood out was sexuality and how like things were looked frowned upon in her home, but it was like she felt alive when she could do things, outside of the home, and all the men she gathered.
She gathered, that's a nice way of putting it.
All the men that she gathered, and how she's just kind of like, yeah, I'm this, and she's laying back after things happen, and it's just like, what a fool, and goes home, and it's just like, she's playing a game. It's just so easy to her that she's getting bored while doing it. And I just want to understand, like, what made you want to structure her like that? Like, is she trying to find a way to create her own drama, or is she just so overpowering and insightful that she's like, let me just play games with other people and see how far I can go?
Yeah, this scene is really crucial, I feel, to her character building when she is young, and it's around when she loses her virginity. And what this awakens in her is this realization of her power in a different way than she's felt it before. At school, I write it that she's always been very popular and people always gravitate towards her. She's super charismatic. And then so that bores her because she's like, okay, well, I know that I'm this way. So then when she has this first encounter with a man and she realizes, oh, there's a new source of power that I wasn't aware of. And she does then immediately become addicted to that. And there's a line there when she says sex was consumption and it was power. And again, it's this feeling of like feeding the hunger inside her. But then, as you say, she gets bored of it after a while. And it's also why we see her increasing her risk with these men, which then feeds into her pattern of how she murders and increasing risk, because she, like, it's that same thing. She just can't be satisfied. So she's always chasing her next high, which is why also like the sex quite quickly stops satisfying her and she's looking for something else. But it's a very dangerous mentality to have, to always be like, because someone asked me recently, like, but what comes after murder? And I was like, it's so true. What would she do next to like chase her high?
What would she do next? I would love to see like a short little after story, you know, like maybe 3 chapters of like life after this. Like, what does that look like? Does she leave? Does she go to a different country? Does she continue this in different towns? Like, I'm very, very curious on her journey. And this comes back to like worrying relatable is how one reviewer described Yarsa. How do you feel about readers who are a little too comfortable rooting for her? Like, do we think like they might be a little crazy, a little deranged? I mean, I'm also kind of rooting like, hey, get rid of her.
Well, I hope people are reading, because I did write her to be relatable, so people would root her. But I do find it funny when sometimes people are like, "Oh yeah, you get to the last murder," and you're like, "No, yes, don't do it." You're like, "The last murder? You were good with all of the others." But I feel there's sometimes when I tell women what the book is about, I see this look like pass across their eyes, and they're like, "Oh yes." It's sort of exercising a weird, maybe deep dark fantasy that some women do have. And I feel that's the relatability, and in the fact that she's in these encounters with men, which we have, most of us experience similar encounters with men. So there is a huge amount about her character that is normal and relatable. And then it's just tipping it at the end. But because, you know, also hopefully you find her funny and you're like laughing along with her, by the time she is tipping, you've been so close to her the whole time that you often do just tip with her. And I think it goes to show just in us in general, like maybe how pliable we are as humans, our morals. If we're like pushed to the edge, and then it's like, oh, maybe.
I remember when I first heard about your novel last year from Penguin, and it was just like, are you interested? And I was like, sign me up, because yes.
Exactly. It's that look that goes on in women's eyes. They're like, yeah.
The literal log line is accidentally kills and keeps going. I don't need anything else. And so it was pretty cool to work and create something in the US to honor your release. And also my fellow, she's now a marketing coordinator with Black Girls Who Write. Her name is Tamia. She came up with this entire game plan and was super excited and executed phenomenally. So we created a playlist, but I do have a question about that a little bit later. I know we have a little bit of time, like about 45 minutes left. So I'll dive right into the next question. Did you ever find yourself writing yourself and thinking, okay, maybe she's gone too far, or maybe she hasn't gone far enough? And if so, did you feel like you had to pull back, or did you want to add more?
So from the very beginning, I knew that she would have to go too far by the end of the novel. I didn't know how the novel was going to end, but I knew that that had to be her character trajectory, because I didn't want people to get to the end of the book and be like, "Oh, so the way to do feminism is to murder men." I was like, no. And I was like, it had to be ultimately a book against violence, an anti-violent book from an anti-violent person. You know, it's to show that we shouldn't be used to this violence we see in society. So I knew she had to tip. So then it was, at what point is she going to tip? And obviously, if she tips too early, that's the thing. She stops becoming relatable. It stops becoming such an enjoyable read. But all along the way, I was like, okay, like what will be? We have to see her incrementally push it, but also incrementally lose any justification. You know, it's why her supervisor pulls her up at the end and is like, "You're doing real academic cartwheels in this thesis," is because everything is unraveling. Yeah, her justifications, her morals, her aversion to like her risk, it's just all starts to let loose by the end. But that was really important to me, that no one is on her side come the final page.
It's kind of like she was in her own sociology experiment. Like, how far can I go with this? Like, it leads us like a, oops, this was an accident, to like, maybe I can create my own study and apply
Yes,
it.
exactly.
I love that. The book weaves in thinkers like Saida Hartman and Stuart Hall. How did you decide where the line was between satire of academic feminism and genuine engagement with it? Because that's
Yeah.
a really hard thing to put into a novel like this, because it's like I want to keep people engaged, but I don't want them to feel like they are reading a research paper.
No, totally. And it was fun to me to think, okay, can I engage with academic theory in a very true way, like in a deep way, but keep it driven by plot? And I guess only readers can say if I've pulled that off. But where the satire came in was probably in the Afropessimistic theory, because, you know, Afropessimism, when it says you only find liberation in death, and then she sort of takes that quite literally, but also flips it on its head in how she's killing men. But all of the theory around Saidiya Hartman, like I really engage with that myself, and I'm really interested in it. Like I believe Yussa is also interested in it in an intellectual way, even if it doesn't actually correlate to what she's doing on the streets. So I wanted it to feel very thought-provoking putting this theory in the book. And actually I wrote a couple of drafts before the Afropessimism came in, because I kept being like, I kept changing what she was doing for her PhD. I was like, I know it's really important, but I just can't figure out the topic. And then my mum said, well, have you looked at Afropessimism? Because it was a theory I hadn't encountered at university. And when I read it, I was like, it fits the plot so well. Like, it's so neat. This is great. And because it's a theory of anarchy, and that is where she is tipping. She's tipping into anarchy by the end. So I just felt there was an interesting play between life and theory here. And of course, within academia, so often it is very much in our heads and on the page that we do this thinking. So it was a bit like, what happens if someone just like really runs with this? Not in the most accurate way, but just runs with it. You know, there is humor to be found in that for sure.
Yes, absolutely. I want to touch in on her friends and how they just are weaved throughout the book. When you were curating her friend group, and also I believe from how it was written, some of them were roommates as well.
Yes.
So how was that like building, that story building, and that relationship building for you in regards to like who was going to have what type of personality and what type of experience?
Yeah, I think I did think a little bit about my friendship group at university. I wanted it to be international as well as from different parts of the UK. And then the thing with her friends is what we really see in that relationship is how she is liked or not liked. And obviously, most people, as I say, like do like her. She does have this charisma about her. She's good at maintaining friendships despite being like really quite a narcissist and quite emotionally disengaged. But this shows her level of manipulation and how she knows how to play people. But then I was also interested in, say, Nina's character, in people who don't like her. And she never gets an explanation from Nina as to why she doesn't like her. But to me, Nina has this sort of just like intuition about her that is very right. So she sees through the games that the persona that Yussa has. So that was the big thing about the friendship. And then just building that world of the female dynamics, the other men that they're dating as well, making it feel relatable too. She's not an isolated lone killer. Like she very much has friends. She's very much in the world that we're all in. So yeah, I needed to build her as a lovable person, and her friends were quite a way of doing this.
I think, and that's another touch point of like not making her an isolated killer, because most men normally are going on killing sprees, mass murders, all of that things. And it's very rare there is a woman that is like a serial killer.
Yes. And I was just going to say too, the other thing about her friends and those female dynamics is for something that happens to her in her youth, because I wanted gender to be really complicated. Even though she's on this hunt for bad men, obviously there are girls and there are things that happen within her female friendships that are equally as bad. So this was important to me to really just complicate the field of gender in general too.
Okay. And I love that, because it's important to really show, okay, this is what women would actually do compared to like what we've seen men do,
Yes.
and how they easily get caught. It's so funny because I want to say sometime last year there was like a TV series kind of about John Wayne Gacy, and I'm watching this and I'm just like, wow. Not only are the kids like not taught to, you know, look out for things, and you don't just hop in a car with a stranger. And well, I was definitely taught like don't.
Yeah, me too. Stranger danger.
Right. And also seeing like how he got caught because he wasn't smart.
Mm.
And I love the intentionality that you do with Yursa's killings, and how it's just like, I'm bored. I'm also smart. So let me make sure that my boredom does not get me in trouble.
Mm.
And I want to know, was there anything that you watched or studied when you were crafting this novel? Like, were you watching any murder mysteries? Were you watching documentaries? Were you researching serial killers? I'm very intrigued.
I did very light research on serial killers because I can't watch that stuff. As I said about watching dark things, I honestly can't do it. I can't be in the house if it's on the TV, like a documentary about a serial killer. So I was really like, oh my God, how am I going to do this research? Like, I need to understand. So I did talk to people who I knew were very into it and who'd watched a lot of documentaries. I also read a really good book called Just as Deadly, which is written, I believe she's a criminologist, but it was an academic book about the history of female serial killers and how they have been just as deadly as male killers, but also the differences in their motivations, which was really fascinating to read that, because often men will have quite sexual motives and that can be different for women, and women don't tend to take tokens from the scene. So things like this helped me like craft her psychology. And then in terms of tone, I actually took loads of inspiration from Killing Eve, that show. I don't know if you've seen that. So good. There's like this kind of the glamour of it, the humor of it, the sort of wacky offbeatness of it. And Jodie Comer is such a lovable psychopath in that show too. And then also Promising Young Woman was another film that I took a lot of like aesthetic cues from. So I'd say it was more film and TV. And then the research came in, like obviously with the academic theory of all the like Saidiya Harman, Stuart Hall, these people I was reading. But yes, no, I didn't go deep into the world of true crime at all. I'll never go deep into the world of true crime. I wish people must find it so weird because they're like, you've written a book about a serial killer. I'm like, I know.
I think that's phenomenal because you were able to detach from going that dark and deep and still being able to craft a wonderful story. So her killings are framed around racial and feminist solidarity. How did you think about the ethics of who she targets and what that says about who she gets to be, about who gets to be an anti-hero?
So, well, I should say that there's really no ethics in what she's doing. She might frame ethics to herself, but I don't think you can ethically go and murder anyone. I'll say that for the record. But yeah, as I said, so I wanted her to kill men in ways that women are often killed. So this gave me an insight into who she was going to kill. It's why I did research around incel culture. I feel like this is a spoiler, but there's someone she kills later on in the novel. I'll just say it, you can cut it. It's why she kills an ex-boyfriend of hers, because women are often killed by their intimate partners. It's also why I staged the scene as her as an escort. This was actually some of the darkest research I did, because there are these websites where women warn other women, and I read pages and pages of violence. So I wanted the violence to be true to life, but victim perpetrator to be switched on its head. This was what made me interested in the killings, because as I said, I'm not actually interested in serial killers. I don't want to think about it, but I'm very interested in how we depict violence on our screens, and how we glamorize violence against women, and how we therefore get very used to seeing violence against women. I was really sick of this. So I'm like, well, let me do the same thing. Let me glamorize it and set up all of these kills. we should feel really uncomfortable because we should always feel really uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But then some of the men I think are worse than other men. Some of the men I've made more empathetic because, again, no one is just that stereotype. You know, going back to the questions around social theory will give you that kind of like top layer of a character or why someone might do as they do. But of course, there's so many complexities underneath that. So hopefully I feel that you're like, maybe some men you're like, yeah, you really deserve that. And then other men you're like, oh, maybe you didn't deserve this. But it should feel messy. Everything about it, nothing is clear cut in the novel. That was important to me. It should feel in the gray and it should feel messy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with something like this, there always should be a little gray because sometimes you'll act and do something on behalf of someone else's best interest, and you'll think like, oh, I did this for this person, but really it's like you kind of did it for yourself. But
Oh, totally. She acts only for herself.
and it works for her. I loved it. Um, Patriarchy and racism are everyday violences, as we spoke. So when Yrsa turns to literal violence, is she the villain or just the most honest character in the room? Because the way that the book is formatted, it's like we're in present tense, but we're also in her thoughts and see what's happening on the page and also what's happening in her mind in tandem. So do you think she's a villain or do you think she's just the most honest character in the room? And then what made you want to craft this story in that specific style?
So I think in regards she is a villain because she is murdering people who don't deserve to be murdered. So I mean it goes back to it. Well, yeah, I'm like, yeah, go yes, sir. I'm also like, no, like she's kind of a terrible, terrible person. We shouldn't support her. But I started writing third person close because someone asked me recently, like, why did I not do it first person? And it just came to me as a third person narrative when I initially started writing, and I normally just go with whatever impulse first comes. But I think what's nice about that is we are very in her head, but we have a slight detachment from her that allows the narrative to pull back at points and see things that she can't see. Because while she is in a way honest, she's also a pretty unreliable narrator, because she is clouded by her own narcissism and by her own complexes. So she can't fully see her own motivations for why she's doing what she's doing. So I think this is what was helpful in the third person close. You've frozen. You froze. You're
Sorry,
back. It's okay.
I'll cut those out. I'm gonna have to cut some things out, but it's okay. My next question is, and I love satire, I love dark humor, I love dry humor. It's like forcing it on my mom, and she's like, I don't get it. And I'm just, of course. Dark comedy is one of the hardest things to register and sustain throughout any medium, whether it's film, whether it's literature. Where are there moments in your writing process where
I missed the question. You froze. Yeah.
I already asked it. Dark comedy is the hardest registers to sustain, no matter the medium, from literature to film to stage. Were there moments in writing your novel where you had to stop yourself and ask, like, is this funny or is this horrifying or is it both? And what do I want to achieve?
When I was writing, I wasn't too aware line by line of being like, this is funny, this isn't funny. I would just let the jokes arise like as they did. But I don't know if it's a good thing, but I think sometimes things are never too dark to throw in a little joke there, because what the joke does is it highlights the darkness even more. And I mean, if you were reading this and dealing with the theory that I was dealing with, it would be so relentless if there was no humor in it. But what's so great about humor and why you really like mess with a reader is if you're laughing, you're complicit. So you're laughing along with her, oh, this is really funny, and then suddenly no one's laughing anymore, but you have been complicit up until that point. So I like to do that and have this dynamic, because you can't just stand back and kind of, going back to the idea of objectivity, you can't just objectively observe her if you've been chuckling. So I took so much, again, from TV shows like Fleabag, I think is so great. There's a lot of very bleak, sarcastic British humor, like in Peep Show or The Thick of It, which I adore it as well as like a form, as an artistic form. So I really hope that I pulled it off. I can't say if I have pulled off the line all the way through. But the other thing too, like even by the end of the novel, I still throw in a couple of jokes there, and I do have this very open end, and it goes back to the idea of wanting the reader to be part of the story, to have to make up their own mind about certain things in the story. But I do love, someone described it as pitch black comedy, and I was so pleased to read that.
That's right. They hit the hammer with the nail on that. The book has a shocking revelation about the origin of Yrsa's killer instinct. Without spoiling it, what drew you to embedding that kind of buried family secret into this story?
Okay, yes, without spoiling. So the maternal line was my favorite line of this novel to write, because it's the most sort of spiritually rooted in the book as well. I think it really gives the book a heat. And I love to think about the issue of inherited trauma, and because this is what the book is grappling with, and when it has those moments where it stands back from Yusuf's perspective, we get this kind of sweep of history. It is to say, well, how has the past affected today? How has violence built around the Black body today? And this is a huge question the book is grappling with. But I wanted to again subvert the idea of inherited trauma. So you have these women in her family line who have done some things. There are some secrets going on. They've got some strange ideas and desires. But I felt that this was really fun to look at as a motivation for her. And it was going to the research on serial killers. I do read that often serial killers will have a very traumatic thing that happens in their past. But I didn't want any of her trauma to be stereotypical trauma. I wanted her to, in many ways, come from a very happy middle-class Black family in London. So then I was like, okay, so what could it be? And this is where I came up with this idea without saying what it is. And what I like about this too is the dynamic between her and her mother. And her mum is a really key person in this narrative, but she's very enigmatic, and she revealed herself to me even so slowly whilst writing the book. But it's just very fun, and it's very sticky between all the women and down this family line.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Honey arrives at a moment when conversations about gender-based violence, justice, and accountability are everywhere. Did the cultural moment shape the book, or did the book arrive at the moment of coincidence?
Well, so I started writing, I got the idea in 2022. And I think it's a bit depressing to say that maybe misogyny is even more blooming in society than it was when I started writing. Of course, there was so much, we'd already had Trump's election, there was a huge amount of stuff in the news cycle around violence against women when I thought of the idea. And I feel like it's only kind of getting worse, which is really depressing. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted the book, of course, to be published into this atmosphere, because you hope that the atmosphere is going to die down. Yes. So I do find it really, really tough and really depressing, the stuff I'm seeing. I recently watched that Louis Theroux documentary on the manosphere, and to see so much disenfranchisement in society being targeted as hate against women still, it's just I lose a bit of hope, and how are we gonna move through this and come past this, because a lot of what went into this book was historical study, and it's someone recently said that history doesn't repeat itself, it compounds, and I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of the misogyny that we've been seeing and how it finds new ways to express itself. So I mean, there's always pushback, of course, and we should remain positive, but no, it's pretty sad that it's being published into this culture.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I think the book is phenomenal, and sometimes we all need an escape from reality. So while it still has different themes of things that are always happening in society, sometimes you want to dig a little deeper behind whoever the main character is. And I think that's very important. Going into that, you were a bookseller at Daunt Books
Yes.
for writing Honey. What did years of being on the other side of books teach you about what a debut novel needs to do?
So I'd written a draft by the time that I started working. So it was less in terms of my own prose that I learned things or adjusted whilst book selling, but it was so helpful to see the industry from that perspective, to see how many books are published, to see the importance of booksellers and like what it means to as a bookseller to put a book into someone's hand. That hand selling is so huge and it's like so wonderful. And the other thing that was so wonderful about the job was just seeing how many people come into bookstores and do buy books and engage and want to ask you for recommendations. Because I think before I started working there, I was so like, oh, people only buy books on Amazon now and the bookstore is dying. I really had this idea. So it was just so wonderful to see so many people so keen on books still, and really having those like great conversations around them. And the other thing that was amazing about the job is that it was like a low-key writers group, because there were so many people working there who were also writing novels. So we then did start up a writers group, and I have another friend who was a colleague and she's just got on submission this week. So finding that community was really huge, because it's very isolating, of course, writing a novel. And if it's your first novel, you're writing it like, what the hell am I doing? Is anyone ever going to read this or be interested in this? So it's really nice to talk to other people who are going through that as well.
I bet. Absolutely. Your first one's always the hardest. And then after it, you're like, I know what I'm doing now, a little bit.
Yes, I
just
I
want to
know
get
I
you
can do it, right?
fun. I guess we'll go into some fun questions.
Mhm.
Uh, if Yersa had a TikTok, what would her comment section look like? I
Oh
always
my
feel like
God.
comment sections are sometimes funnier than the original videos, or they just like keep with the banter. I'm
It's
curious.
like it's so hard to imagine Yasser on TikTok, because I think she'd be so scathing about the whole platform. Um, I feel like she would probably post up really inappropriate things about her colleagues and like about the university, like the spill the tea on Cambridge in a way that she absolutely shouldn't. It was like deeply unprofessional. I think other students too would come into her TikTok videos a lot. So a lot of the comments would probably be, this is very unethical, but also quite amusing, I feel.
I want to dive into the title of the book, which is Honey is Sweet, but it can be dangerous because of bees.
Mhm.
Some people have allergies. And it's something that never expires, which is amazing. Was the title always there? Did it arrive later? And what made you want to choose Honey as the title?
Yeah, so the title was always there because when I got the idea, I was sat in a cafe with my mum and we were discussing it, and she was like, you should call it Honey, in the very first conversation ever about the book. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good title. And then I think I think we must have been discussing the first kill being around a bee, because I wanted the Beyonce imagery in there. That's where that came from. And then it was there the whole time in my writing process. I gave it to my agent, and there's something quite key that happens in the book now to do with Honey that I tweaked to kind of like land the title more. But I like the idea of honey trap, as you say, it's sweet, but there's like a danger in it too. And then like there's ideas of being too sweet, and women too, like we're made to be sweet. So playing with how she looked, and I thought that was really fun. But actually the title did go through a whole load of debates with my editors, because we didn't know if it was going to perform super well as a title, and we went through pages and pages of other titles, so many conversations back and forth, and it got to the point where I kind of like went off on a really long walk and I was like, the book has to title itself. And I really let it go, and I was like, no other title is coming to me. I think it just has to be called Honey. And I really do feel like it was the right title, so I'm glad we stuck with it.
I'm glad you stuck with it too, because I think it's such a powerful title, and it just weaves in all the elements you have within the book, dark comedy, feminism, murder.
Yes.
um, I think it's a perfect title, and it's also a very attractive title as well. So we have 10 minutes left. We are going to do a quick round robin, just off the dome. Don't think too much about it. If you could get Honey adapted into a film, who would you love to see direct the movie?
Oh, I actually don't know directing wise. I feel like I don't know enough directors to say. But what I would really hope for in an adaptation is that comedy is really kept, that like real line between the darkness. So I mean, someone like Michaela Cole, of course, she does that so well. In like she does the absurd, the emotional, the deep, the humor. Yeah, she's probably actually Michaela Cole.
Okay, that's a good choice.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal. Feminist icon or problematic fave? Pick one and name them.
Feminist icon, probably Audre Lorde. Her essays like really influenced a lot of this work. I think Your Silence Won't Protect You is such a wonderful essay collection. And her essay, The Uses of Anger, I read multiple times before I started reading it, writing this. Problematic fave.
Oh, you only
Oh,
had to pick one.
okay, that's good because I can't think of someone.
Writing a killer or writing a love scene? Which is harder?
Writing a love scene. I think it's easier to write darker things and it's easier to write sad things. Anything that is very joyful, I don't know what it is about it, but it's much harder to write. I think because writing's fueled by conflict. So if they're just like very in love, then you're like, I need to make this interesting for the reader. So a love scene.
Okay. All right. One Jamaican, one Scottish, one Irish thing about you that would surprise people, or a dish.
Well, a Jamaican thing is that my grandma used to send me chicken curry in the post when I was at university. I think it's kind of amazing.
I
She
would.
would. I would receive packages of chicken curry and these little jars of curry sauce, and my boyfriend at the time would get so excited. He was like, "It's chicken curry night!" Royal Mail delivery.
Oh,
Irish is that my dad now lives in Dublin with my stepmom. And Scottish is funny because I get asked all the time about my heritage and where I come from. And I mean, my granny was born in Scotland and my other grandma in Jamaica. So I always say this. But then people are like, but you're not Scottish at all. But I'm like, I've been asked where my heritage is. So that's the answer. So
no, I love that. So my family is on my mom's side is Jamaican. My grandparents are Jamaican, and I just want to know, was she mailing the curry chicken from Jamaica or from like?
oh no, from London. She lives in South London. That would be insane. No, from Jamaica, she will always bring back mangoes and avocados. Like one time my dad came back from Jamaica with a suitcase literally just full of avocados. But
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no chicken curry is going internationally like that.
After this call, I'm gonna call my grandmother and I'm like, why didn't you mail me curry?
Well, it's so funny because she always mails my brother and I food. And one time she mailed my brother pomegranate, but she died like she de-seeded the pomegranate. So when it arrived, someone said to him, "You've been sent a limb." Like all of this blood just dripping out of the package.
Oh
And he's
my
like, no, that's just my grandma selling me fruit.
God, that is so funny. I love that. Last question. If Honey gets Hollywood treatment, who would you want to see playing Yrsa? Or top three?
Well, my brother and I were discussing this recently, and we were like, can you imagine if it was Zendaya putting that out into the universe? I
I
feel
was
she would.
thinking the same thing.
Yes.
So
I
good
think
at like comedic beats, but also like like dark humor, and also like doing stuff like going on the edge. And I'm seeing it more and more as I'm watching this new season of Euphoria. I think she would be perfect.
I think she would too. I think we should like say it many, many times. And the other person who I thought was, I can't remember her name, but she's in Queen Charlotte in Bridgerton, like in the Queen Charlotte series, and she plays the young Lady Danbury. And I
Yes,
think she's like mesmerizing. And she is the closest to how I imagine Yessa to be in terms of what she looks like, I would say.
I think she would be great too. Those are some good options.
Thank you.
Good options. Well, Imani, thank you so much for chatting with me today to talk about Honey, to talk about your experience, your heritage, but also the different styles and themes within your novel. I had a wonderful time reading it. sign me up if you want to do a part 2, take her. It was very, very enjoyable. And it's so funny that this is commencing because also tomorrow I have another interview with Alicia Harris, who is the writer and director of Is God Is, which is coming out this weekend. And it's just funny how the themes of feminism and rage is like back to back on my calendar this week. So I'm really excited because it really is fate. And I love when things just easily just work itself out. And I'm just like, I realized that last night and I'm like, wait a second. Everything I'm talking about is Black women, emotions, rage, vengeance. Sign. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Is it a sign that maybe you need to start killing some men?
I won't. But I love it. And I just love that our voices are being told in these settings and being so powerful about it and being upfront and honest. Like, yes, my characters are doing this. They are women. They are Black, and they're going to do it and get away with it. And it's fine. And that is such a joy to see, especially this week. So thank you again. Thank you for entrusting us to have a fun pop-up in DC to advocate, advertise your book. I know the city of DC loved it, and also joining me on our conversation today.
No, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much the support means to me. And my friend did go to the pop-up in DC. She sent me photos. She said the latte was absolutely delicious, but the woman in front of her got the last copy of the book. She sent me a photo. And I was like, this is so amazing to see this in DC, like when I'm here. So honestly, I can't say how much I appreciate it. So thank you.
I'm so happy that we got to accomplish it. And then I'm happy that your friend got to go and see it in person. That was my heart. And I hope you have a fabulous day. Please let me know if you need anything. Black Girls Who Write is always willing to reach out, advocate, uplift, and do whatever we can to support our community.